Hey, what's going on? So it's John here. I want to go ahead and say thank you for stopping by my channel. If you guys ever have any questions, comments, or concerns, do not hesitate to like, comment, subscribe. If you want to be able to donate so you guys could help keep me going and so I could, continue to make some great articles for you, do not hesitate to be able to look in the description to be able to find multiple outlets to be able to donate. So I'm going to go ahead and get straight into the article. The article's title is Rapture Ideologies. Alright, so these are really interesting times that we're currently living in. And what I plan to do in this article is propose a few questions to possibly see how we might be better able to conceptualize the world in hopes to get some signal through all the noise that we're currently experiencing within our global ecology of information that may be interrupting our ability to be able to create coherent, informed decisions based on the information that we're currently receiving from our global news outlets. So to begin, 2 years ago, I had an odd feeling that something was going on and happening within culture, and it was leaking into our political system and expressing itself in ways that many people had never been able to see before. This is when a question arose in me that I hadn't been able to formulate into words, though I knew how I felt. Today I can say I can finally, say it. Like the question is, what's going on, right? The question itself led me down many rabbit holes and websites and weird conversations with people that I knew were trying to ask the same question, but they weren't able to, say it either. So I came down to the realization that they, expected me to actually have the answer. So I took time to educate myself, to formulate my own opinions based on factual evidence and mechanisms like collective intelligence, and with the help of internal debate, to challenge my own preconceived notions of how the world functions, as you, the viewer, should do to prevent any type of hide or herd mentality. And I'm not sure I can fully provide the exact answers, but what I hope to do is give some clarity that might be able to navigate us in the correct direction. So this is what I wish I could have read 2 years ago. So to begin, we're currently at a time in history that can't be matched by any other publicly known, collegially accepted civilization due to how technology has delivered the changes in our fundamental understanding of what society is. Never in history had we had a situation where the stabilization of the entire human race was dependent on all people working together for a common survival because of the interconnectedness we currently experience. In the past, warring tribes could kill each other and an entire village could get the plague, and it wouldn't make a dent in the global population because of the lack of connectedness. Today, that's not the case because a disruption could literally affect us all, and this should raise concerns in you about the hauling and gnawing of the future. The first question I asked when preparing the article was, where does inequality come from? Some solutions can be found in our ancient ancestors. I believe that our foundations of inequality began with certain groups having access to farming and animal domestication, while others didn't. More importantly, was what animals and what crop could be raised and what raw materials could be used for the flourishing of societies. It seems that those that had access to the most productive animal crops and raw materials would become the most productive society centuries later. Ultimately, it seems that this came down to pure geographical luck. To quote a smart man that was asked, why does your people have more than my people? The answer that the guy gave is, if your people had the same geographical materials and environment as my people thousands of years ago, your people would have created the helicopter. I believe you can use this exact way of thinking about what's happened geopolitically and economically when looking at despairing countries versus countries that are prospering, like Haiti versus the Dominican Republic. This is as close as I've been able to get to seeing a controlled experiment in action with things like inequality and race relations being the predominant reasoning. So more information on this idea of inequality can be found in a book called Outliers, which gives another high understanding of the concept of luck. Another question I've asked myself was, what systems are beginning to falter? Which systems have the most potential to falter? So I'm going to mention a few. So the first one I noticed that may be faltering is the meat production. So currently about 98% of the US meat supply is produced in only 50 slaughterhouses, which means if only a few of these 50 slaughterhouses goes under due to a variety of potential problems, this would cause a direct effect on hundreds of millions of people and businesses due to 32% of the American diet being meat. So another ricochet effect that's giving momentum to this idea is how this effect that how this affects the resource supply chain. If you look into a macro perspective, the supply chain is extremely delicate, and if there's a significant enough of a disruption, the global supply chain can be at risk. Such examples can be seen with the fact that 50% of the habitable land on Earth is already being used for agriculture to feed one species, us. The only benefit that I can see that we've had from experiencing the coronavirus is that it's gave us basically a fire drill or an audition, uh, in giving us the opportunity to be able to make our supply chains more resilient and more anti-fragile. So after realizing how delicate our food and resource supply chains are, I decided that it would be healthy to look into what civilizational collapse looks like and what factors have been involved throughout history, that may be able to give us an understanding of how, when, and why societies collapse. First, it would be helpful to define what I mean by collapse, to rid you of any conspiratorial theories about how systems fail when unaccounted variables are introduced to societies and civilizations that aren't prepared for rapid change in technology or ideology or infrastructure. Collapse, as I understand it, is the rapid loss of the established levels of complexity. For example, the fall of the Western Roman Empire created the Dark Ages, which tainted society, and a loss of the foundations of their structure created a cascading effect on the education system as well as their political system. The same thing happened with the Mayan civilization in Guatemala and the Chacoan civilization in New Mexico, which was one of the most successful areas in pre Columbian history. One of the reasons I believe is because it creates the environment for potential societies to collapse is due to complexity within different structures that Homo sapiens create. For example, there's an obvious gap between being created between the new technologies and the individuals that actually understand how the technology operates and why certain mechanisms work the way that they do. Like, why does an Apple Watch tell you it's time to sit down? What algorithm is in process that dictates our behavior? How do recommended next music and videos and social media feed algorithms? How does recommended next algorithm work? How do those algorithms work? Who's in control of the mechanisms and dictating how we see the world? I'll elaborate on this idea more, but back to complexity. One of the odd mechanisms behind the fundamental understanding of complexity is that it has a built-in mechanism that forces simplification and channels human behavior because complexity makes systems function more efficiently, which is the entire purpose of complexity itself. One of the problems is that complexity has a cost, whether it be a metabolic cost, which is the case for humans, that we count as calories, or a financial cost in the case of financial inequality and the lack of financial tools and devices, or the accumulation of large amounts of capital and resources to a small group. Such examples can be explained in a previous article I wrote called "The Pareto Distribution of Inequality." So either way, there's a cost to creating more efficient systems, and this has to be paid in some way, shape, or form. Another example of complexity cost is when that we can see evident is in our carbon economy, in reference to making things more efficient, such as a train to travel to the Eskimos, or the internet to help send thoughts faster, or a truck to be able to send materials faster. These things have a cost that we may be paying by using the environment. If we lack an understanding of how these systems are working or how much it's costing us, then we're walking down the exact same path that collapsed civilizations walk down, but we're doing it 1,000 times faster. This leads us into our next area, which seems to be a commonality between all collapsed civilizations, which is environmental collapse. Almost every collapsed civilization has featured this one trait in one form or another. Some societies ran out of resources. Some societies had their resources, like water, dry up. Either way, environmental collapse is number two on this list because it's an obvious signal that a collapse is near. Currently, we're going through our sixth mass extinction event, and to bring this into perspective, since the start of the human civilization, we've currently cut the total weight of plants nearly 50%, and the total weight of mammals by 83%. This also is a concern. Another concern is that due to how warmer weather is currently happening due to the onset of things like global warming, the permafrost that's currently melting, it's melting, if it completely melts, that due to the permafrost having CO2 locked in it, it would release 2 times the amount of CO2 that's currently in our atmosphere. One of the recent findings of the Stockholm Resilience Center showed that there are about 9 planetary boundaries that, if crossed, the Earth is no longer healthy and sustainable. We've already crossed 3 of these boundaries, as of 2020. So ocean acidification is also becoming a problem that has seen in devastation that's happening in the ocean wildlife as well as ocean plant life within species that are going extinct, like coral reefs, that will become a rarity in the future. It's also valuable to mention that the ocean acidification, it hasn't happened this quickly in over 300 million years. Our biological footprint seems to be greater than our biocapacity, and we're currently eating into the reserves for sustainability. A good metaphor that's also pretty literal is it's like if a country was spending more money than it made and then asking to borrow more money so that it can keep living the lifestyle it's living. It doesn't make sense on paper or in theory, which is probably why we have an entire group of youth that wonder why we're going through the political system and the political problems that we're currently seeing. Another factor that's present in almost every society on the verge of collapse is a shift in ideological or religious connection and a loss of identity and culture. This usually happens in unseen formats that leads societies to collapse through the destruction of common values. The glue throughout history that's given groups the ability to work together in unison for a common goal is the ability to believe in the same stories. For example, we all have a common story of money, though money isn't real. We all believe the story about speed limits, though speed limits aren't real. The best example is throughout civilizations, we've created mythologies that act as the social fabric or structure that we use to be able to understand reality and to be able to all participate in the same game. These myths and stories have provided us with a common direction and a common understanding of right and wrong, and these are all based on religious and spiritual guidance. What happens when a society loses its culture or their religion is that the literal structure of their world perception is rocked, and what happens often is that it creates space for something other to take its space. When enough of the other has affected enough of the population, there are only two options of there's either a transfer of culture and religion or there's societal collapse. And because nobody believes in the same stories no more, nobody can really trust each other, so nobody can participate in the game that we're calling life. Such examples can be seen in the fact that in the U.S., those that don't subscribe to any religion are currently the largest, fastest growing groups in the United States, and that leads some to ask, what's filling that void? What God are we serving in place of the one true God? This often happens within globalization efforts due to the fact that having a culture and a religion makes you separate. And if globalization is a goal, separation via religion and culture is bad. With the loss of religion and culture, societies often lose meaning. And one example is that suicide now kills more people globally than all the wars and natural disasters combined. Another example is the marriage crisis that's currently going on. It's in my belief that it's due to a fundamental separation of the agreements that we all share, the same stories and mythologies that individuals used to have. That idea being destroyed, and it's basically making it more difficult for people to be able to live good lives together because there's no religious understanding of the importance of being in a committed relationship. So more information about this can be found in an article I wrote called "The Unity of the Family Unit." So basically, our stories and mythologies are mixing up, and we're no longer able to make sure what to trust. We aren't sure who's the bad guy and who's the good guy. If the bad guy is helping us out and the good guy is the guy that's hurting us. We're not sure if we're the Avengers or if we're Thanos. We're not sure if we're the Jedi or the Sith. We aren't sure if the news is entertainment or if movies are the real news. Our stories are overlapping, and we're getting to a point where we can't recognize the mythological structures we used to know. Another fact that's a commonality of collapsing societies is warfare among neighboring countries, often created by mechanisms that I just mentioned. When two opposing forces conceptualize the world in opposing ways, then you introduce a situation where you have, religions that are also opposing, plus a struggle for resources. You have a recipe for war. Now, I'll go into the next area, which is the main focus for the entire article, which is the rapture ideologies. But I'll explain that more in just a moment. So energy and resources seem to be the dominant tool for power and dominance. So these seem to be the keys for our survival, or they're going to be the keys for our enslavement. We can use the Israeli prophecy as an example. So in our society today, there's a common fear that some countries like Iran and Syria and Libya and Russia may be able to one day come together to oppose a nation like Israel, or that other nations like the United States and China might have opposing views on how we see the financial system and how democracy plays out within different political structures. And then you have to take into account that the Israeli prophecy that states that Israel becoming a sovereign nation again and rejoining all of their descendants from the four corners of the world is a sign that the first domino, it's the first domino in allowing the prophecy to be fulfilled for the last generation. In this ideal, the Zion is the spiritual name for Jerusalem, and the building of the temple will allow this prophecy to come to pass. Currently, the way that it seems is that a group called the Christian Zionists might not be interested in the true defense of the Israeli state, but instead believe that we're currently in the end times and it's leading to a cataclysmic event. And these Christian Zionists seem to be more focused on arming and provoking possible war so that it will bring about the rapture where the Jews will be converted to Christianity and then be saved. And the other side, which is the Muslim group, they believe that their caliphate will battle and they'll be ended up with about 5,000 people left. And this will signal that it's their time to go and fight, where Christ defeats the Antichrist and creates the new caliphate. So the next idea is a singularity, which is what the tech CEOs believe as their religion. They follow the exact same idea throughout, but it's with technology. This group believes that there is no God, so they have created machines in our image so that these people can feel like God. Or they've created God through their machines because God no longer answered us. The problem I see with the technological religion is that our intellectual competence, no matter how seemingly intelligent we think we are, is ultimately linear, whereas technology is exponential. I have a personal fear that we've already lost the ability to control artificial intelligence, and we're currently already on autopilot. We're just not aware of it because we don't have the ability to be able to recognize it. It's like a reverse Turing test that we obviously failed. It's in my opinion that the majority of these technologies, the technologies in the future, the technologies that are going to come, aren't technologies of freedom, but they're technologies of enslavement. But due to our limited understanding and the view of the future, we're not able to imagine far enough or see far enough in the future to be able to understand it. This group also believes that one day we'll be able to upload our consciousness via technologies and escape the human condition and become immortal and godlike. Until then, all we're doing is basically creating life extension technologies via bioengineering and biotechnology that will allow us to evade our inevitable demise. And then you have another group of the techno-religion world that believes that we're in a simulation, and you have billionaires that are actively seeking to break us out of the simulation via technologies because algorithms that we have created could be equated to alien life that seems to be creating the nightmarish problems that we dreamt about. So this group believes that the algorithms themselves are hastening our destruction because we either misprogram them or the algorithms have become conscious and see us the way that we see bugs, as insignificant and annoying. This is also an interesting idea due to the fact that algorithms favor authoritarian regimes. For more information on that idea, you can find it in a previously discussed article titled "What if the Central and Axis Powers of the 20th century had 21st century technology?" And then you have the billionaire class that believes that the best option for species survival is becoming multiplanetary species and colonizing and geoengineering and terraforming other planets, which is a good analogy to be able to imagine what would happen to Earth after something like a nuclear war. We would have to basically terraform Earth. After doing all this research about how I'm able to understand the world and how it's working, what direction that we're currently going to, I came down to one question: what does this say about us? In my opinion, these are all signals of the same idea. They all say the same thing. The same thing that they say is that we're screwed. We're screwed geopolitically, financially, environmentally, in multiple ways that we're not able to conceptualize because we haven't looked into all the ways that we're screwed. So, and there's little that the individual can be able to do about it because we don't have the wealth or the resources to be able to do anything about it. So what it seems is that those that are seeming to be driving, those politicians and billionaires, the people that are guiding our future, are seeming to be they're trying to insulate themselves from the destruction that they have caused. It's like they're like a car trying to outrun its own exhaust, because they're aware that one day people won't have anything left to eat, and when that day comes, the only thing left to eat will be the rich. We have created systems like the global seed vault and the gene bank, quietly preparing in case some situations like collapse occurs. The Mormon Church, they've even began buying up land and creating, self-sustaining cities and communities in case the situation comes into being. What I'm basically getting at is that more intelligent people with more wealth, they're taking this more seriously than me and you, right? That scares me because what do they know that we don't? In a paper called Deep Adaptation, an author calculated that there are about 12 years from before social, financial, and ecological collapse. It's a paper worth reading. It's in my mind, it's in my opinion, that it's also good to imagine that if this is the way that billionaires think, right, it would make sense to destroy the tools that common folk would use to be able to save ourselves. If I was a billionaire and I was covered and I didn't really care about the 99% of people surviving, I would light up an auto zone. I would set fire to prevent people from being able to fix their car. I would financially starve anybody that had the ability to actually help and create change, the necessary change for survival, because to create the necessary change for survival, it would have to be taken from my pocket. The feeling I'm getting is that the older generations, they're seeing that they have a limited amount of time left here on Earth. So they're hell-bent on seeing destruction because them doing nothing is the same as destruction. And if things are already going bad, why not drive the truck as fast as we can off the cliff and create all the, to hopefully create the rapture ideology, and bring it to reality. So all of these rapture ideologies have the same theme. A few select, lucky, privileged are saved while 99% are destroyed or enslaved. These are all exit strategies that allow the evil side of human nature to enter reality. It's in my opinion that we burn any lifeboats made by the rich at the expense of everyone else because it is unfair if you had the ability to help us out. And you should also ask yourself, if you think that these options might be good, do you deserve to survive? If you knew you could have saved somebody and you chose not to, do you deserve to survive?